It's recording now. All right, we'll make a start, inshallah. May as well make a start. Seems like this is my first time presenting here. I thought it would be apt to commence with a topic such as proving the necessary existence of God, of Allah. So, I mean, the entire Risale Nur, I guess, enterprise is kind of about belief, isn't it? You know, it's purely about belief. So therefore, there can be no more important matter when dealing with the Risale Nur, or even just as a human being, there can be no more important matter for you than obtaining belief in God. Okay, that's how I understand it. So, why is belief so important, though? You know, why is belief such a critical thing to a human being? And as I see it, belief is critical not just for its own sake, but moreover because what you're trying to do is, I mean, obviously you've been created and you're here in this universe and you have purposes for your creation. Now, in the absence of belief, at least the base level of belief, of course belief has its infinite levels, but without at least the base level of belief, you can't even fulfill the purposes of your existence, you know. So to my mind, there can be no more important matter than obtaining belief. There'll be a few people who would disagree, a few believers who would disagree anyway. So therefore, seeing as though it's our second week, inshallah, for this year, we'll start with the topic of proving the necessary existence of God, the Arabic of that being wajib al-wujud, or in the Turkish it's obviously wajib al-wujud. Okay.
But they just said the camera, just check it.
It's not working?
No, it's just the angle.
Oh, okay.
Can you see it?
It seems okay to me, yeah.
Yeah, is it okay? Yeah.
I'll try to centre it a bit more. Okay, I hope that's all right.
Yeah.
All right, that's right. Okay. So this is actually going to be a multi-part series. We could never hope to finish this in any one session. So assuming that I'll be sort of maybe presenting every second week, this might take, you know, several weeks or several months to actually get through. I'm going to take it part by part because, of course, there are different types of ways of obtaining belief in God through different sorts of arguments. Tonight, I'm only seeking to describe what's known as inductive arguments as opposed to deductive ones. Okay. Over coming weeks and months, what I'm hoping to do is build a cumulative case, okay, for obtaining certain verified belief in God. Okay, a cumulative case. So, having said that, I'm even confident that if we can get through most of what I hope to get through tonight, that we can, at the very least, demonstrate the necessary existence of God. So what I mean when I say that is that I'm confident that we can prove that, or we can show that it is impossible for there not to be such a thing as a God. Okay, it is impossible, and we can prove this deductively. Sorry, I think I said that I was going to go through inductive arguments tonight. I actually meant deductive. Sorry, that's my mistake. Deductively speaking, logically speaking, we can prove that the existence of God is impossible. The non-existence of God is impossible. Okay. All that will be left for us to do from there is to demonstrate the identity of that being. Okay. So the identity, and when I say the identity, I also refer to the attributes of that being. But at the very least, we're going to prove that such a being like a God is wajib. Okay, is necessary. G'day, come in. Come in. Okay, we've only just started, guys. We've only just started. So, just to give you an update as to what's happened in the last few minutes, I'm making the very bold claim tonight. Okay, a very bold claim that we can. Logically speaking, we can prove that the existence of God is necessary, okay? That the non-existence of God, of Allah, is impossible, okay? And I was just explaining to Murad that over coming weeks, we will go further and we will demonstrate the identity of that being. Okay, so there has to be a being such as a God, but the identity of it. Okay, is it, I don't know, someone like Isa alayhi salam, for example, or is it someone more like Allah, for example? Okay, so that's what I'm hoping to demonstrate. So also we went through the importance of belief, okay, before you guys came in. So just very shortly, why is belief so important? It's because only once you've obtained belief, at least the base level of belief, can you then go on to fulfill the purposes of your creation. Okay, so clearly we've been sent here for a reason. We actually can't fulfill those reasons, we can't carry out those duties that we're here for without having obtained at least a basic level of belief. Okay. Contrary to what it says on my opening slide, tonight we'll be discussing what's known as deductive arguments for the existence of God. Okay. I think I had written there inductive arguments, but deductive arguments. So I'm going to describe what a deductive argument is, and I'm going to tell you why is it that I'm even bothering to describe deductive arguments. Okay. Now, very broadly speaking, there are two kinds of ways of obtaining belief in a given matter. Okay, there are two very broad ways that a person can prove something to themselves or to others. Okay, one of them is through a deductive argument. Okay, in the science of logic, sometimes this is referred to as a priori truths. Okay, a priori means from before. Okay, now I don't want to get too hung up on definitions and things of that nature, but all we need to know is that deductive arguments are the sort of arguments that you can arrive at, or that you can understand, or that you can prove something with without having recourse to scientific examination, basically that's without having to actually go out and do a scientific experiment. You can, just by analysing concepts, sometimes prove the truth of a matter. Okay. Now, the good thing about deductive arguments is that as long as I can prove that the elements of the argument are true, okay, it is impossible for its conclusion to be false. Okay. So, in that respect, if I can prove the existence of God deductively, I can prove it with a very high level of certainty, in fact, perfect certainty, okay, with full certainty, all right, because it is impossible for the conclusion of a deductive argument to be false so long as its elements or its premises are true, okay. So that's the benefit of it. The other one are inductive arguments, and these are also known as the scientific method. Now, these offer a likelihood or a probability of truth rather than a complete certainty. So it might be better just to go through and show an example rather than get hung up on definitions. Okay, just ignore that heading. I've got the inductive argument. That's actually a typo. This argument is a deductive argument. Okay, a deductive argument. P stands for premise. Okay, it just means a proposition. Okay, all men are mortal. Socrates, the famous philosopher, is a man. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. Okay? So the thing with this argument is that I don't need to, as one thinker once said, I don't even need to get up off my seat or my couch to demonstrate its truth. Okay? Merely by sitting here and analysing the concepts of what it is to be mortal and what it is to be a man, I can arrive at the conclusion. All right? And so long as P1 and P2 are true, so long as they're right, it is impossible for the conclusion to be wrong. Okay, so that's basically a deductive argument. Now, an inductive argument, again, just ignore that heading. I was trying to type this up in the last minute this afternoon. But remember that I said inductive arguments offer a likelihood of truth. Now, that's not to say that they're not as good as inductive arguments, okay, as follows. Here's an example. The sun has risen every morning in the east throughout the history of the earth. Therefore, the sun will rise in the east tomorrow. Okay, so who doubts the truth of this? Does anybody doubt it? Okay, sitting here today, does anybody doubt that the sun will rise tomorrow? Okay, nobody doubts that. However, the fact is that this argument does not offer the same level of certainty as our previous argument about Socrates being mortal. Okay, it offers only a likelihood of truth, albeit a very high likelihood. There is at least a logical possibility that it's not true. Okay, there's a logical possibility that one day the sun might not rise in the east. Okay, now isn't it true that cosmological events might conspire one day to prevent the sun rising in the east? Is that not the case? Okay, for example, stars die, don't they? So stars die. So therefore, it could one day be that my proposition there and my conclusion are not right. Okay. So which of the two arguments is better? Okay. Although the former argument, the deductive one, offers complete certainty of its truth, and the latter provides only a likelihood of truth, albeit a very high one, is the former necessarily better than the latter? And some thinkers would say not. They'd say no. Because the thing is that the issue at stake is belief, all right? What we're trying to do is we're trying to believe something, okay? So there's no point in a very good deductive argument, which, if understood, can offer complete certainty of its truth. There's no point in that argument, insofar, especially as lay people are concerned, if it can't be understood, okay? Because deductive arguments, by their very nature, they kind of involve like a massive amount of strenuous, cognitive, cerebral exercise, if you like. They're very hard to understand at times, right? Extremely difficult to understand, and often the layperson will prefer something that he can understand more easily, something which can be shown to him through physical or scientific proof. People are more apt to accept these kind of proofs. So it's for this reason that the Qur'an's method of proving Allah's existence is actually an inductive one rather than deductive, okay? Because the Quranic method of proving things is the one where you look around the universe, okay? And the Risale method is exactly the same. You look around the universe and you say, okay, so here's a sign, here's evidence of Allah's existence. Here's, for example, a human being, and look how wisely it functions. Look at the artistry in it. Look at the beauty. Look at the mercy. Okay, and we see these things, and we say to ourselves, well, surely it must have been created by a wise one. Many thinkers have sort of made the argument that think of, for example, the science of optics. Our ability to see. There is such a thing in this universe as seeing, isn't there? Right? That would indicate that there exists a maker, a creator of that, a designer of that whole concept of seeing, okay? But an atheist will say, your argument is merely inductive in nature. There is at least the logical possibility that it's not true. There is a logical possibility at least that maybe chance processes have done this. Of course, that chance is only 1 in 100 or 1 in 1,000, and Ustad says you'd be a fool if you took the path of 1% probability, whereas, the other path has got 99% certainty of its truth, okay? You'd be a fool. You'd be a fool, wouldn't you, if you acted today as though the sun wasn't going to rise in the east tomorrow, wouldn't you? Ring up your boss and say, whoever works here, ring up your boss and say, I'm not coming into work tomorrow because there is at least a logical possibility that the sun might not rise in the east. The sun's not going to rise in the east. It's at least logically possible, So nobody is going to act, no sane person is going to act in accordance with the 1% or, of the 0.0001% probability, whereas, the alternative path has got a 99.999% chance of being true. Okay, so that's why the Quran and the Risale-i Nur focuses on what's known as these inductive proofs. You know, we can see these things with our eyes. The deductive proofs, which involve cognition, you know, thought and strenuous thought sometimes, maybe cannot be understood by everybody, you know, so not everyone will benefit from them, possibly, okay? So, because belief is at stake, many thinkers have said, although the, you know, scientific kind of arguments have a slightly lesser degree of certainty, perhaps, a tiny bit less certainty, they are nevertheless better arguments because of their ability to convince. Okay. Okay, so we've already gone through this. The Necessary Existent focuses on inductive arguments since its aim is to strengthen belief. Deductive arguments, despite their strength, often fail to convince. Okay. Having said all that, it's not to say that the Risale-i Nur does not still provide some of those deductive logical proofs, okay? It still contains them. What Ustad doesn't do is he doesn't seek to reprove them. He merely states those arguments, and he spends much more time on, you know, the testimony of the, you know, Kitab al-Kainat, which is the Book of the Universe in English. So he sees more value in focusing on those, but nonetheless, there are two very good deductive arguments that Ustad has seen fit to include in the Risale-i Nur, and especially in Ayatul Kubra, the supreme sign, which comprehensively proves the existence of Allah, if anyone's interested in reading it. So the reason why I've gone through this very lengthy prelude, okay, to this topic is that what I'm seeking to show you guys is that sure, we accept all the inductive proofs that exist in the Quran and in the Risale-i Nur, okay? We accept those, we've got belief, and we use those to strengthen our belief, okay? But who I'm actually addressing today, really, more than you guys, are those minority of people, okay, who are dogmatic atheists, and they will always rely on that 1% or 0.1% chance that maybe those inductive arguments are wrong, okay? So I'm saying to those guys, even if you say that there's a chance that those arguments are wrong, there's no chance that these deductive arguments are wrong, okay? They offer complete certainty of Allah's existence, okay, as follows. We'll go through them now. Okay, I'm going to take a quote now from Ayatul Kubra. Ustad says, since change and mutation are to be observed in the world and all things, the world must be ephemeral and created. It cannot be uncreated. If it is created, then there must be a maker who created it. Okay, so don't get stuck on this because we're going to go through it, okay? What Ustad's done here, he's taken an argument, actually, from the Mutakallimun, the Kalam scholars of medieval Islam, chief among them being Imam Ghazali. Okay, he's taken an already well-established or well-proven argument and he's merely restated it. Okay, he hasn't spent a long time going through the reasoning behind it. He's merely stated it and gives a couple of examples to support it, which we'll go through later. But for our purposes tonight, let's actually delve into this argument more deeply. Okay, let's have a look at it and let's see why it's true. Okay, so that very short statement from Ustad is actually derived from what's known as the argument from the temporality of the universe. Okay, so all that means in basic terms is temporality refers to time. Okay, so anything that's related to time is said to be temporal. For example, we are temporal beings. Okay, we exist in a universe where there's time. The universe is a temporal realm. It's a place where there's time, you know, it's inescapable. Okay, it's possible that there could be a realm without time, that realm being Allah's realm, of course. So time isn't something that exists necessarily in every possible world. Okay, some realms could be timeless and other realms could be temporal, and we are in a temporal realm. Okay, so the first premise or the first element of the argument is as follows. Okay, whatever begins to exist has a cause for its beginning to exist. The world, the universe, began to exist. Therefore, the world has a cause for its beginning to exist. Okay. So how does Ustad's statement, where he was talking about, and I'll repeat it here, I've got the relevant section in front of me. Since change and mutation are to be observed in the world and all things, the world must be ephemeral and created. It cannot be uncreated. So how do we think that statement relates to the argument which I've just put up? Okay, whatever begins to exist has a cause for its beginning to exist. The world began to exist. Therefore, the world has a cause for its beginning to exist. Okay, the way the two arguments are related are as follows. Change is what gives rise to temporality. Okay, think about it like this. Let's pretend that you've got a situation where, I don't know, you've got a lump of matter. You've got a lump of matter that exists on its own in a small universe, and it just sits there. Okay, it does not move. There are no changes. There are no events. Okay, how are we to differentiate time? You know, what happens is when there are changes in the universe, when there are changes in the world, okay, that gives rise to temporality because the changes occur one after the other. Okay, they're not occurring simultaneously; they're occurring one after the other. So from there, we can prove that we are in a temporal realm. If there was ever any doubt that we exist in a temporal realm, we only need to look to the changes that we see in the universe. Okay, so what kind of changes? Okay, is anything ever not changing? Ask yourself that. Is anything ever not changing? Okay, everything is always changing. Okay? Like, for example, stars are always rotating and orbiting. Planets. So we're talking about the macro world now. Even things like people, trees, planets, they're always changing in some way. Now, a change can be something as simple as a movement. Okay, so as I'm speaking now, my hands are moving. Those are changes. Okay. Now, going down to the micro world, if we look at atoms, we see that matter is never quiescent. Matter is never still. Okay, it's always moving. Now, let's say that we reduced the temperature of an atom down to absolute zero. Would it still move? Would it still be in any way active? It would be. It would be. You would think that it wouldn't. You would think that it wouldn't be, that even the electrons around it would be still. But that's not the case. Science can actually demonstrate today that even at a temperature of absolute zero, okay, matter still retains what they call its ground state kinetic energy. Okay, so matter is never still. The nucleus of an atom, even in a solid thing like this table, is always agitating, it's vibrating, you know. Okay, so we've established that, right, that there is change in this universe, okay, and those changes occur one after the other, they give rise to temporality. Okay, so the changes occur in time. Now, so the changes occur in time. So now here's the question, okay? Is it possible that there have been an infinite number of changes, okay? Well, and the reason why this is an issue is as follows, okay? So what we're trying to prove is that the universe had a beginning, okay? If we can prove that the universe had a beginning, then we can prove that it had to have been created, okay? And I'll explain why shortly, but atheists might, and they actually did once, and actually continue to today, hold on to the idea that maybe the world, the universe, has existed for an infinite amount of time. Okay? Maybe it's just always existed. You know? Sure, so they accept that we're in a temporal realm. They don't deny that. There are changes. Changes give rise to temporality. So we are in a temporal realm. But nonetheless, maybe the universe has existed for just an infinite amount of time. If the universe has existed for an infinite amount of time, then they'll say, well, what need for a creator? It's just always been there, okay? It's just always been there. It's just a brute fact. It doesn't need an explanation, okay? It explains itself. It's just always been there. That's what they'll say. What Imam Ghazali and the Mutakallimun proved, okay, is that it is impossible for there to have been an infinite number of changes, okay, in the universe's past history, and therefore it's impossible for there to be an infinite amount of time in the universe's past history, okay? It is impossible. Why is it impossible? It's because they can demonstrate that such a thing as an actual infinite is not possible, all right? So what's an actual infinite? Okay, an actual infinite is just that, something which purports to be like a collection which purports to be actually infinite in number, you know. So things can be potentially infinite, certainly, you know. I can say I've got a potentially infinite number of books at home, you know. So it's on its way to infinity, but no one can say that they've got an actually infinite number of books, can they? You know, does that make any sense? No one can actually say that they have an actually infinite amount of anything. All right. Now, the Mutakallimun proved this. Okay, Imam Ghazali proved this. He said, sorry guys, what he showed is that if you say that there's an actually infinite amount of time or an actually infinite number of anything, you know, an actually infinite number of atoms, for example, right? An actually infinite amount of, I don't know, revolutions of the sun, you know, because if the universe is infinitely old, then that's what you'd have to say. You'd have to say that the sun has revolved, spun on its axis or whatever, an actually infinite number of times, all right? But then Imam Ghazali says, how is it then that there are infinites of different sizes? Okay, infinite is just infinite. How can there be two things which are infinite that are of different sizes? Okay, as follows. He says, for instance, the sphere of the sun completes one revolution in 1 year, while that of Saturn makes one in 30 years. Therefore, the revolutions of Saturn are 1/30th of those of the sun. But if the universe is infinitely old, and both the sun and Saturn have made infinite revolutions, how is it that one has made more revolutions than the other? Okay, so he's shown that the idea of an actual infinite existing is ridiculous. Okay, it's absurd and it is logically precluded. Okay, so it is impossible for there to be an infinite amount of past time in the universe's history, or an infinite number of past changes or events. Why? Because don't we see that events still continue? Okay, every time I move my finger, that's another event. Okay, every nanosecond there is a new event. Okay, atoms are agitating. There are new things happening all the time. But hang on, if the universe has existed for an actually infinite amount of time, how is it that I can still add one more to it? If it's infinite, I shouldn't be able to add to it. Infinite's infinite. Okay, so Imam Ghazali would say, how can one more be added to the infinite, right? So, in countless different ways, we can show that it is absurd to suggest that the universe has existed for an actually infinite period of time, okay? It must have existed, therefore, only for a finite period of time, okay? So, that being the case, there was a time, well, there was no time, there was a point at which it didn't exist, okay? And when I say the universe, what do I include in that? Okay, I'm including time, I'm including matter, I'm even including space. Okay. Now, funnily enough, recent cosmology supports this age-old argument. Okay, has proven it again scientifically. However, the Muslim thinkers had shown it logically even before we had the ability to show it scientifically. Okay, so this argument is so strong, okay, it is so favoured that even today, even Christian thinkers hold this argument up. They put it up in lights, okay, and they still rely on this argument today. In 2011, it is still probably the #1 argument from a logical or, deductive perspective at least, for proving that there has to be such a thing as a God, okay? So it is an extremely powerful argument, and if it can be understood, not everybody might be able to grasp it at first, but I think it's actually reasonably simple, I think if you give it some thought, it's reasonably simple and it really makes sense, So, what have we understood so far, okay? Does anyone have any questions up to this point at all? Or, anything not clear about any of the points of the argument?
Just the argument about
I'll go back to it.
actual infinite
Okay,
and
sure.
its impossibility
Yep.
from your example.
Yep.
What would we say to those people who would say, well then, how is it that your God is infinite?
Okay.
Is that an event?
Yeah.
Like either way?
That's an excellent question, and it is a matter which has already been dealt with. It's certainly been dealt with. What it revolves around, what it's based upon, that kind of argument, I guess, that attempt to refute this argument, I guess. What it rests on is an equivocation of different kinds of infinity, Don't forget that Allah is not a material being, okay? So Allah is immaterial, okay? So when we say that Allah is infinite, what we're saying is that He is infinite in a qualitative sense, okay? Because what part of Allah are we claiming is actually infinite? Like, are we saying that Allah has got, an actually infinite number of parts? Allah has no parts. Allah is immaterial.
Yeah,
Go on,
I've just
please.
got a question here because the infinity argument there is about the existence that we see here.
Yeah.
It's not an infinite argument about. Well, that's what I understood. That you're
Sure.
not arguing that infinity is not possible outside of this realm, but he's arguing that within this realm, that infinity is not possible.
Mm.
Does that make sense? So in this universe, with our physical eyes, the things we can see physically, infinity is not possible in that realm. But in realms outside of that, that's totally a different question altogether.
Can we also say that, would it be correct to say that the concept of infinity itself, or actual infinity,
Yeah.
whichever way you want to look at it, is in our universe dependent on time? Because
In what way? Dependent
you
on
me-
time,
you-
in what way?
Well, you measure infinity, usually it's measured in units of time, whether it be... not
Events.
necessarily,
Yeah.
sorry, let me rephrase that. It's measured in
Like material things?
material things that,
Yeah.
whether it be...
You're on the right
units of
track,
mass,
yeah.
units of measurement, units of time. So it encompasses all that.
Yeah.
I actually was going to say too, infinity, remember, is only actually a concept. It's not something...
It's not a physical
Yeah,
reality.
yeah, it's not. It's something that we need in order to be able to, work with those sciences that we have, such as mathematics or,
Yeah.
engineering.
Perfect,
Or, we don't have zero.
Mhm.
Physically, I can't show you zero. But it's, again, a concept that we
concept,
need.
yes.
And that's why people are trying to use that in the wrong path that he's trying
Yeah.
to disprove in that sense.
Yeah. Excellent question. And like when I... Assalamu alaikum, come on. You found the room, guys. Sorry, but we're broadcasting, so I couldn't answer. So sorry about that.
There's another table at
Okay, so actually, I wouldn't mind that maybe another week actually just focusing on that topic in isolation. But I just want to say briefly that here's the thing: like, in what way are we saying that Allah needs to be infinite? Okay, I see it like this, right? Allah is immaterial, and He has attributes. Okay, He has the attribute, for example, of mercy. Okay, so He shows mercy to beings. Right now, we say that attribute is infinite. Qualitatively, it is infinite. Now, it's not. Mercy is not a physical, material thing, so that we should say that it can't be actually infinite. Okay, the notion of actual infinity doesn't even apply it's not even doesn't even have anything to do with the concept of mercy. Right? What it means is that regardless of how many beings came to Allah requiring mercy, Allah would still have mercy to give. His mercy wouldn't run out after, I don't know, 1 trillion beings. Okay, so it's in that sense. And think about it like this: you're a person, and you've got the capacity to love. Okay, so you love your child, don't you? Right? You love your child. Now, is it not true that you have an infinite amount of love to give to that child? As follows: you see your child today, and you show him love. Now, would there ever come a day, assuming that you could live eternally, assuming that you could live for billions of years, would there come a day when you said, look, because I only have a finite amount of love, I can no longer love you? It's just a ridiculous thing to suggest, right? Love is not something, nor is mercy, okay? These are not things which run out. They're not material things, okay? So in that respect, they are infinite, okay? But that's totally different to what we're describing here. Here we're talking about things such as time, things such as space, things such as matter. None of these things can be actually infinite, as has been proven by Imam Ghazali. They cannot be actually infinite. Therefore, the only other alternative is they must be finite. Now, since all the elements of the universe, time, space, matter, all of the things which comprise the universe are all necessarily finite, therefore the universe itself is finite. Okay? So, what have we done? So far we have proven that the universe once didn't exist, and it was brought into existence. Okay? Now I ask you, if something doesn't exist, can it bring itself into existence? Okay? It cannot. It simply cannot. If you don't exist, what decisions can you make? What potentiality do you have? What dreams can you have? How can you even want something? You don't exist. So the universe once didn't exist. It can't bring itself into existence. So therefore, it requires a creator to create it. Okay? So there we have a deductive argument for the existence of a creator of the universe, which, seen as though we've demonstrated that its premises, its elements are correct, okay, and that continues to be done today, actually. I mean, the argument is very old, but still today in 2011, the world's leading philosophers are relying on this argument to win debates against atheists, okay? In fact, I can inform you that certain leading atheists will even refuse to debate certain philosophers who rely on this argument. Okay, there's a guy, for example, William Lane Craig. He's a Christian philosopher. He's probably the best Christian philosopher in the world, if not the best philosopher even in the whole world. He's a very, very skilled philosopher, and he has actually championed this argument, and he's referring to it as the Kalam, which means Kalam, the Kalam cosmological argument. So if you ever hear that, it's referring to this argument that we've gone through tonight. So, and they're more than happy to say that it's an Islamic argument, okay? They're more than happy to say that. So we can actually take some measure of pride in this, because anyway, how is it that people like Imam Ghazali can propound these kind of arguments? How is it that they can do this, right? I would suggest it's because they're in possession of the truth in the first place, because the Quran is the truth, okay? And since they're on the true path, they're able to speak the truth, okay? And they're able to propound true arguments. So just the fact that the number one deductive argument in the world today for the existence of God comes from Islam, for me, is, in its own right, confirmation of the truth of Islam. But anyway, we'll go on because we're digressing. Okay. So just to conclude the argument, what I've said here is that since there cannot be an infinite number of past temporal events, the universe must have had an absolute beginning. And since a non-existent thing cannot create itself, the universe must have been brought into existence by something other than itself. Okay. Since the notion of an endless chain of explanations is absurd, we have no alternative but to posit a necessarily existing being, wajib al-wujud, with whom the chain of apparent explanation stops. Okay, I just want to talk about that for a moment. Here's the thing, right? Atheists, materialists, scientists, whatever, they'll say that take any phenomenon in the universe, such as life, such as rain, such as planets, they'll say, no, it's totally explained by, the things in the universe, the laws of the universe, I don't know, the matter in the universe, the properties of it, the initial cosmological, conditions. All of these things, they reckon, can explain why there is such a thing as a biological organism, But here's the thing. Can those things really adequately explain anything whatsoever, okay? Can they adequately explain? And the example that I kind of like to use in my mind is like this, right? You're at the lights, okay? You're at an intersection. You're the first car. At that intersection are 6 cars, all waiting for the light to turn green. Suddenly comes a drunk motorist and just crashes into the back of the 6th car. And what happens is that then each car hits the car in front of it, and there's a multi-car pile-up, as often happens, right? Okay, so now I'm the first car. If I say that damage to my car is as a result of the guy behind me, would I be telling the truth? Like, would it be a complete explanation of what's happened? Of course it wouldn't be, So a better explanation is that, yes, the drunk guy hit the 7th car, which hit the 6th car, and so on and so forth, which then hit my car, all right? That's the more fuller explanation, isn't it? So similarly with phenomena in the universe, the situation is that nothing can explain anything else because that thing too requires something else to explain it, okay? Everything, every cause in the chain of causes requires another cause to explain it. Now, a moment ago we proved that there can't be an actually infinite anything, right? There can't be an actually infinite number of events or items or whatever, right? So therefore there also can't be an infinite number of causes or explanations in the chain, right, to explain any given thing in the universe. So what that necessitates is a necessarily existing thing that doesn't itself require an explanation, okay? There has to be something where the buck stops. There has to be something which purely exists in its own right, okay? Because the alternative is absurd. There is no other choice. Now, okay, can anything in the universe act as that, necessarily existing final thing? Nothing can, because all of those things in the universe once didn't exist, okay? And this is actually supported by scientific evidence today too, right? That once there was no such thing as space, there was no such thing as time, there was no such thing as matter. The universe had an absolute beginning, right? So therefore it's pointless to try to say that any given thing in the universe can be explained by other things within the universe. They can only ever provide a partial, an illusory explanation for those things, right? So, again, what Imam Ghazali proved was that the concept of a necessarily existing being is required, is necessary, okay?
This goes back to the example they used to give about multiverses, how it's an endless chain of...
It's amazing that we think alike, Barry. It's amazing, mate, because I was just thinking about this on my way here, because again, people will say, okay, sure, maybe this universe once didn't exist, but they've come up with models for how maybe a pre-existing universe might have created this universe, okay? There are things such as like oscillating universe model and the multiverse model and so on and so forth. Actually, all of those have been shown to be incorrect scientifically. So none of those models actually work scientifically. They've all been shown to be invalid. But even if that couldn't be done, again, as you so aptly put it, because of the impossibility of an actual infinite, right, we'd have to say that even the chain of universes, if there are an infinite number of universes, even they sorry, there can't be an infinite number of universes, but if there are a multiverse of universes, if there are billions and billions of universes, even they would require a necessarily existing being to explain them, okay? Because they can't explain themselves. Okay, and we're actually encroaching now on the second deductive argument. I don't know how I'm going for time. Okay, I've only been going for like 50 minutes. Okay, so I'll go for another 5 minutes and then we'll take a break and we'll go on to the second one. But what we've just done is we've encroached onto the second deductive argument, which is the argument from contingency. Okay, but I won't go any further with it. So let's just quickly talk about what do we mean by wajib al-wujud, necessary existent. Okay, wajib al-wujud for any of our Arabic listeners anywhere else in the world. The words wajib al-wujud are actually a name of Allah. Okay, it is one of Allah's names, and it is a name which draws attention to the fact that since there are ephemeral, finite, temporal things in existence, and they cannot explain themselves, such a thing as a necessary existent is required to explain them. Okay, so similar to how the name Burhan, has anyone heard that name from Jevshan? Burhan, right? Am I right? I'm pronouncing it right. So the name Burhan, again, that refers to the fact that Allah is a being who is Burhan. There are evidences for His existence in the universe. So similarly, in a similar vein, Allah's name of Wajib al-Wujud draws attention to the fact that His existence is necessary to explain phenomena. Okay. Ephemeral, finite beings cannot be explained by other finite beings because they too are created. They too require something else to explain their existence, okay? Which we've already gone through. Hence, the necessary existent, wajib al-wujud, is required. Okay, so we'll leave it there, and we'll take a break, and we'll continue with the argument from contingency after the break, inshallah.
Just stop the recording.